Hi, I'm Father Ken Metz. I'm a retired priest living at All Souls here in Sanford, Florida. This week we've been taping a lot of masses in preparation for Holy Week. And one of the things that we did was try to figure out what are some of the things that all of these holy days are about, and what's their history. I mean, here we've got the palms that are going to be blessed on Palm Sunday. They're palms I think that most of us use here in the United States. They're cut here in Florida, and they're out in the fields. Then we have palm trees like this palm tree right here, this little one. Is that the palms that were used in the time of Jesus? That's the question. And the answer is yes and no. But palms have a real history regarding Florida, believe it or not. It has something to do with Palm Sunday. And I'll get to that at the end. In the 4th century, after Christianity was allowed to be practiced publicly, they began to reenact the entrance into Jerusalem with processions in Jerusalem. And they would try to do all kinds of things, and it spread from there. People would celebrate this in their own parish churches. What they would do, sometimes the person represented Jesus would be either the Eucharist, holding the Eucharist in the monstrance, or sometimes it would be a statue of Jesus. Sometimes it would be a crucifix. One of the more intriguing ones was a man on a donkey, and they would pull him through the streets on a cart, all trying to reenact, to get people into the sense of what was going on at that time. But almost all of those things disappeared. What remained was still having a procession with palm branches, where we reacted and relived in a way what happened when Jesus came in to Jerusalem. Down through the years, it kept that same kind of a process. And it would be like a blessing of ashes. And in Rome, what they used to do was they'd have Mass at one of the outlying parishes, then have a procession through Rome going to St. Peter's. They would have a Mass at both places. Eventually, the Mass at the first place was dropped because they only wanted to concentrate on the Mass at St. Peter's. And that's kind of the way it comes down to today. A blessing of palms in another place, perhaps outside the building, perhaps in the back of the building, and then bringing this grand procession into the church where Mass was celebrated. There are some other interesting things. One thing is that they did not only use palms. What happened was that a lot of times they started decorating things with flowers. If they were bringing the crucifix in as part of the procession, that would be festooned with beautiful, beautiful flowers. And a lot of times, in some of the, especially the Germanic areas, they would come in procession from one part of the city into their church, but outside the church was a cemetery. We don't have that here in the States. I mean, very rarely do we have it. I know a couple of places in Florida where we have it, but not too many. And what they would do is they'd come into the cemetery and the procession would stop, and then family members would go to each one of their family tombs, their family grave sites, and they decorate the place with flowers. In fact, in some places, in Spain, for example, this became known as Flower Sunday, Dominica de Florida. And that's where an interesting thing happened. Because if you remember your history down here in Florida, Ponce de Leon arrived and saw Florida for the first time on Palm Sunday. And so designated it La Florida, because it was on Florida Sunday, or Sunday of Flowers, that he saw Florida for the first time. So that's how we got our name down here. And it's tied together with Palm Sunday. Now, there's one other question. And I think it's an important question. Were the people that praised Jesus and welcomed Jesus with hosannas at his entrance into Jerusalem, were those the same people that 4 days later turned against him. I found out somebody has an answer for that. Pope Benedict the 16th. And this is what he said. All three synoptic gospels, as well as St. John, that means all the gospels, make it very clear that the scene of the messianic homage to Jesus was played out on his entry into the city, and that those taking part were not the inhabitants of Jerusalem, but the crowds who accompanied Jesus and entered the holy city with him. The point is made most clearly in Matthew's account through the passage immediately following the hosannas to Jesus, son of David. When he entered Jerusalem, all the city was stirred, saying, "Who is this?" And the crowd said, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." They didn't know what was happening. People had heard of the prophet from Nazareth, but he did not seem to have any importance at all for Jerusalem. The people there did not know him. The crowd that paid homage to Jesus at the gateway to the city was not the same crowd that later demanded his crucifixion. I think our answer today, or our question today, is what crowd are we in? What crowd are you in? What crowd am I in?